And I think it is only in the last 18 months or so that we have seen the global community really understand, and to use a phrase that I've used in relation to our own government, I think the penny has finally dropped. We're beginning now to understand that global warming, climate change, is the biggest challenge facing humanity. And if global warming is allowed to go unchecked, as Dr. Pachari has said, the consequences for humanity and the environment are quite simply devastating.
And the reality is that poor people are already suffering increased variability in their weather patterns due to climate change. The number of reported natural disasters has almost trebled from 1,110 during the 1970s to around 2,935 between 1993 and 2002. During that same period, the number of people affected by storms and floods rocketed from 740 million people to 2.5 billion. And similarly, the cost of damage increased fivefold to $655 billion US.
Now, those rises in temperature that I mentioned are our best estimate of what we think will happen to temperature. But we know that there are uncertainties in the science. We know that the carbon cycle feedback could be larger than we think. And if we take a worst case scenario, then even in the case where we reduce emissions dramatically, in the way that I suggested, our best estimate was 2 degrees, but in the worst case it could be closer to 3 degrees in terms of the increase in temperature. So we still need to plan for, even with significant mitigation, we still need to plan to adapt to the climate change which is unavoidable, or the risk of that climate change. And clearly, if we delay our reductions in emissions, or if we aren't able to reduce them as quickly as we would like to, the increases in temperature will be larger.
Post-war economic structures has encouraged us to pursue greedy and harmful lifestyles, believing that techno-fix solutions will be our salvation. The truth is, though, that blind faith in the ability of technology to sustain a growing global population, hardwired to materialism, that has already put us into ecological overdraft, is frankly bonkers. It's time for a different economic model that is about replenishment, compassion, nature and nurture, and true sustainability in all its contexts.
There's a lot of greenwash going on. People think that you can set targets for CO2 emissions in 2050 or even 2030. But the fact is that we have to phase out the coal emissions. And so you can't, and I couldn't get the German environmental minister to understand this. He said, well, we'll just have a carbon cap and that will solve the problem. And in the meantime, we're going to continue to build more coal-fired power plants. Well, if you do that, you guarantee that you cannot solve the problem.
And the science that has turned opinion into fact in terms of climate change and its consequences and the challenge that it poses has really finished the discussion and the argument over whether or not climate change is as serious as some people have claimed. It's finished the argument as to who is causing it and what is causing it. It's us. The way we live, the way we travel around, the diet we eat, the standard of living that we have grown to enjoy, particularly in the wealthy Western world, or the developed world if you want to call it that. It's us that are causing what is soon to be, if not already, irreversible and dramatic consequences of climate change.